So this workshop actually came about by requests from faculty to help revise teaching statements for tenure, promotion, whatever it might be. And it actually was what I had done in the past was I had already done one for graduate students and took that one and then really kind of reshaped it so that it reflected more of faculty who have the experience teaching and have that deeper knowledge of how they have changed and how they have grown. And so hopefully this will help you to either write or revise and kind of reevaluate the teaching statement you may have used when you got the job that you have now. So, all right, so where we're going today, we're going to talk about the role of the teaching philosophy. Right now we have, I say introductions, and I just want to mention we have folks from Columbia and Beaufort and Aiken as well. Terry just joined us, so we have, let's see, nursing and computer science and biology and civil and environmental engineering and School of Medicine and business administration. What an array of folks here. So welcome everybody. Thank you very much for being here. We're going to do a little bit of brainstorming. I know I sent you guys that series of questions a little bit late. It slipped my mind. So I'm going to give you some more time to do a little bit more brainstorming, but then what we're going to do is talk. Because one of the really cool things of attending this webinar in person is hearing what other people have to say and sharing and kind of bouncing ideas off of each other. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to get y'all to develop the thesis statement, kind of the introductory paragraph, start your outline of your other ideas, and then kind of give you some guidance along the way. So you're going to be walking away with a really good start for your teaching statement or teaching philosophy. So what I want y'all to think about before we start this process is the point of writing a teaching philosophy. It's, yes, it's a hoop you jump through, but it also does, first of all, get you to reflect on your teaching beliefs, your teaching approach, and it is basically your conception of teaching and how you go about not just doing things in the classroom, but why and the value of it and how you have changed over time. One thing that I've noticed for people who haven't written one of these before is that some people will put in these absolute statements like active learning is the best way to do activities in the classroom, or cooperative learning is how you should be able to do this. So these types of what we call absolute statements tend to be cookie cutter. If they sound like a textbook, don't use it. You want it to be very personalized, very personal, first person type of narrative. So you want to outline your innovative practices, what you have done in the classroom, ones that have been effective, thinking about as you reflect on them, why they were effective, why you incorporate them and continue to use them. And so how it is that you actually teach. So we all have very different types of courses that we teach, labs, whatever it might be, graduate seminars. And so you approach each of those differently. So you want to think about why you do it that way, or if you're going to teach those, how you might go about doing it based on your experiences. So it really does need to show that you have been reflective and purposeful in the choices that you make when you step into the teaching realm, essentially. Okay. And again, please feel free to continue to put comments in the chat. I will be monitoring it as I go, answering questions as I go. Thanks, Terry. All right, so you need to provide specific examples. Oh, and by the way, I did send y'all a second set of documents, so you should have received the questions and the job tenure, post-tenure example yesterday, and then I sent you another set of documents this morning of what we'll be working with today. So if you did not get that, put that in the chat and I will send that to you. But back to what the statement of teaching philosophy is. Need to have examples, personal examples, evidence of your practice in the classroom for your particular discipline or what type of course that you actually teach, what it looks like, learning looks like in your students. And I've seen examples where both ends of the spectrum, where there was one example that took up an entire page. That's too detailed. That's precious space. And then I've seen examples where there had been example after example after example. And I think that is too much. It's too scattered. So the example I gave you of the job application stage, reflection, and then post tenure really does a good job of taking examples and showing the value of them and not putting too many of them in. So if you haven't had a chance to kind of skim through that, I really like that example of how it has been changed over time and what he valued and then added into it for the post tenure. So you also want to talk about pedagogical theory. So one of the documents that I sent you was a PDF of something I put together several years ago and have been continuing to update. But what I've discovered with, of course, graduate students, but also with faculty, is that you do pedagogies, teaching techniques, and sometimes don't really know that that's what it is you're doing. You don't know the appropriate scholarship of teaching and learning phrase. And most of you do, absolutely. But I've given you this primer that describes a lot of those. And so I wanted to kind of point out, you know, we all are blended in hybrid learning experts now, but case-based learning, collaborative learning or peer learning, distributed learning, experiential. So this is just to help you kind of see what it is that you do and get a better handle of how you might describe it, or take that description to help you flesh out how you will talk about that particular technique in your teaching philosophy statement. But you do need to be careful that you don't, quote unquote, name drop. So I do active learning, I do collaborative learning. Well, if you do those, show me, show me the example of what you do, how it looks in the classroom, how it benefits your students. So do be careful of that. And you really do, you as faculty need to think about why you teach the way you do and how it is grounded in why it works for your discipline. So how is it, of course, you know, science, STEM versus social sciences, business, nursing, all of those have different ways of teaching based on the learning outcomes of the course, the style of the professor, the number of students that you have. And so you want to show why what you're teaching the way you do benefits your students and it works for your students based on this is the best way to teach this type of material. And every discipline, if you're not familiar with it yet, every discipline has a journal of teaching relative to their discipline. So you can Google that and find that on the library website. And if you want some guidance with that, I'm happy to help you find those types of journals because there's a bunch of them out there. So really what it does is it answers the questions why you teach and what it is that you teach. And I'm not talking about content, but are you also teaching skills and emotional intelligence and communication, those types of things. And then how do you do it? How do you actually incorporate that into the classroom? And how do you know if it's working or not? And that's why there were so many questions for y'all to reflect on, because there's a lot of components. And you, with your experiences, have different ones that are more important to you than others, depending on where you are, your discipline, whatever it might be. So basically, if someone stepped into your classroom, what does it look like if they were watching you teach? How might they describe that in, you know, a review or any type of document? Okay. All right, so let me give you guys, so like I said, I gave that to you last night, so I want to give y'all about 10 more minutes, or 10 minutes to go back to those questions that I gave you and reflect some more now that we've talked about what it is that you need to be thinking about. So this is the document that I gave y'all last night to kind of develop your ideas, brainstorm. So I'm going to give y'all till 12:10 to add more to these questions or to answer some of these questions that you haven't had a chance to do. Okay, and if you've already done that, if you want to add some more, you want to go get coffee, that's totally fine, but we will come back at 12:10 and start talking about what y'all have. And so if this was an in-person workshop, y'all would now be at your tables writing and reflecting. So go ahead and do that now, and I would be wandering around the tables. Okay, so back at 12:10. All right, so what I would like to do next is have y'all either put into the chat box or turn on your mic and share that way. But go ahead, and what we're going to do is take this in stages. So let's talk about the first two questions first. what teaching is to you, why is it that you teach, and what learning looks like in your students. So if you answered one of those questions, go ahead and share what you wrote in the chat or in the mic, and let's hear what it sounds like from different perspectives, different disciplines, different locations in the career path. So who wants to go ahead and you can copy and paste into the chat or turn your mic on. All right, so opening minds and encouraging curiosity and confidence. Awesome. All right. And I'll talk about who is. So Tiara is Darla Moore School of Business. And I teach to pass on real world experiences in the business environment, focusing on leadership aspects of team motivation and leading teams under stress. Excellent. Teaching for me is about sharing knowledge and experience through different mechanisms and to diverse audiences. I teach because I find students finding interest in various aspects of the career rewarding, absolutely. And Johanna, excuse me, you are civil and environmental engineering, excellent. Dexter says to teach to share my knowledge and experience, hoping students will be able to apply what they learned. Yes, that is certainly truth. And Dexter is integrated information technology. Let's see, Laura says understanding how what they learned in anatomy and physiology and pathology and apply that to patient treatment and evaluation, making connections for them. Excellent. And Laura is nursing. Any other comments that y'all want to share? So I see a nice little trend here of application and hoping students sharing their experiences, and you enjoy doing it. You enjoy teaching. You like seeing students getting interested in the content, passing on real world experiences. Okay, good. All right, let's look at, okay, so Tiara says I'm in the, oh, sorry. So Rasha says teaching computer science and engineering should not be concerned. Oh, interesting, with training students to use the tools of today, but rather teaching the underlying concepts needed to quickly achieve mastery of the new tools that arise to support the demands of continuously evolving applications. That is beautiful. Awesome. Tiara says, I'm in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion at the business school, but you're doing your PhD in philanthropic issues or studies, trying to combine business and philanthropic studies concepts. Oh, that's really interesting. So maybe people can help you with some ideas, but that's an interesting combination. All right, excellent. So let's move on to the second two questions. Why does what you do in teaching make a difference? Why is it relevant? And what do you value about teaching and learning? I realized one of those questions kind of had a repeat, so I was putting it here. Why does what you teach make a difference? Why is it relevant? What do you value about teaching and learning? And it may be a little bit of a repeat of what you talked about in, say, number 1 or 2, but go ahead and post your responses to questions 3 and 4. Making a difference, value add, relevance. And I know a lot of people like to say that light bulb moment, which whenever you see it, it's real. It's lovely. It's wonderful to see. All right. So Terry says, I value the interaction between me and the student. I want to see that I am connecting with the student and that they can understand, identify with what I am teaching. Absolutely. Value is helping to increase, this is from Catherine, helping to increase awareness about the world inside and around to us, to contribute to something bigger than ourselves. Yes. Johanna says, I believe my teaching style helps students to connect content from different courses. Oh, cool. So instead of looking at my classes as entirely new knowledge, I try to develop the method so that the students can find connections between other areas of the career. So that's awesome. Yes, very, very important. Teaching makes me keep learning. That is so true. I often tell my students, I don't know the answer to that. That's a really good question. Let me go look it up for you. And those are my honor students in my marine science class. Laura says, we can all learn from each other. Co-teaching, teacher teaching a class, students asking questions, helps me to clarify or explain better, students explaining concepts to other students. Excellent. Yes. I think that's a really good, and I'm go back to what Johanna wrote, the trying to develop the methods so students find those connections between other areas of the careers. And I know we all try and do that with making it relevant, making students see why it is that they're having to learn what they need to learn. So that's a great thing to verbalize. And that's another thing that I like to have people show what they wrote, is because especially whenever I do it where we have a lot of English and philosophy and, you know, very experienced writers, sometimes what they write is just, you're just like, that's so beautiful. So it's good to hear what the way that others tend to verbalize ideas and thoughts, and because it helps you as well. Any other comments for numbers 3 and 4? And if so, go ahead and post it in. I'll come back to your comment. So let's, for next questions, numbers 5 and 6, what are your goals for your students, and what are your effective or favorite teaching methods, if you want to talk about pedagogies or styles of teaching or how you design a classroom, whatever it might be. So post in the chat your answers to, if you answered them, questions 5 and 6. And I know some of y'all kind of said something of goals tied to some of the questions previously, which is kind of the point. You're really connecting all these ideas as you're fleshing out your philosophy, essentially. Okay, so we have, Terry says, I want to see the student approach their future managerial responsibilities with a sense of humility, respect for their subordinates, and a desire that my students understand they have a dual responsibility to the company they work for, making it profitable, being successful, and developing and teaching their subordinates. That's awesome. Very, very cool. Johanna says, as a teacher, my goal is to encourage students to develop critical thinking, and I want students to doubt. That's awesome, but I want to provide a safe space where they feel they can question things. I think I use experiential learning, inquiry, problem-based learning. That's what it sounds like, yes. Tiara says, asking students to create, this is for number 6, action steps and a plan for contributing positively to JEDI, which is justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in their own lives. Showing them topical material made by creators outside the US and UK. That's awesome. Yes, so important. Building a knowledge, so Swapan says, building a knowledge base, improve and apply the skills in real life. Yes. Laura uses Mentimeter and Socrative to create an engaging class discussion. So yeah, I use Poll Everywhere. I'm gonna have to look into Mentimeter. I've only looked at the website. So these are ways to do polling online where students can go into their phone or go in through their computer to do that. Catherine says, I have found a few things that seem to work well per student feedback. Guided lecture notes. Yes, many case studies, real life examples. And, you know, I was reading some type of resource, I don't remember where it was from, online about when you're teaching online, actually giving them, and I did this in the past and then I stopped doing this, but giving them those guided notes of, you kind of give them the outline and show them where they're kind of making those connections as something that they fill in as they go through like a video or your lecture or whatever it might be, that really helps them to not just get the content down, but really think about structuring their understanding. So that's a great idea. Yeah, Swapan says in-person teaching is better. I know that we all possibly prefer it. I know that it's gotten better for me teaching online as I've gotten more experience and become more comfortable with like what I'm doing now, going back and forth between the chat and the screen. Okay, so let's do questions 7 and 8. How do you interact with and engage students? And this may tie into your pedagogical approach. Or how do you then also, do you assess student work and learning? How do you know that they did learn? So go ahead and put your comments in numbers 7 and 8 in the chat. And as y'all are doing that, one of the things I do with my marine science students is the beginning of every class, I do what's called a critter camp. So I do a information videos of a particular weird or interesting critter every class day, and I've become known for that. So the students will tell others to take my class and, oh, you'll love the critter camp. So apparently that has become wide knowledge in the honors college for them to take my class for the critter camp, but it engages them. They look forward to it. I even had a student ask me to do a critter cam the day of the exam. He was like, can you show a critter cam? So anyway, so did anyone have number 7 or 8 If you didn't, I can go ahead and move on. So these are actually kind of, as I said, tied into some of the others as well. But I think it is, whenever you do start writing your teaching statement, your teaching philosophy, assessment is an important part of it. So do go back and reflect on that as you move forward after this webinar. All right, so I think several of y'all may have answered then numbers 9 and 10. How does your research influence your teaching, and how does your background affect your teaching and influence your teaching? So if you wrote on those two, go ahead and copy and paste into the chat for numbers 9 and 10. All right, so number 7, both in person and electronically. Yes, interactingly, okay. And research for number 8 research helps finding emerging avenues. Yes. And as faculty, you really do, especially as you're moving forward through your career, bringing in that idea of the research impact, whether you're bringing in what you do for research or the actual research out there, so that they can see how to apply it, see what the real world scenarios are like, essentially. Terry says, my research is a reflection of my personal experience in business leadership. Exactly, exactly. Let's see, Catherine says, research and background adds relevancy, real world experiences, connections to concepts. Yeah, so this whole idea of your research you can use as storytelling. Students remember stories, and so using your experiences, your research experiences as those stories really helps to engage your students and helps really cement that learning. Lori says, I'm also a nurse practitioner, so I will bring in some of my experiences and expectations for bedside nurses. Yeah, definitely don't do what I did. Not that you have had that problem, but that's, that's a great example. So Swappin says, background gives strength to teach effectively. Absolutely, that is a great statement, where your background and experiences give you the strength to really show the value of what you're teaching, what your students are trying to learn. Excellent. Okay, any other thoughts or comments about these questions? Johanna says, research is essential in my teaching. I use experimentation to connect theoretical concepts and motivate them to do research, maybe to pursue graduate school. Excellent. Yeah, you got to have the theory to do experimentation, but you also need new experimentation to really ground the theory as well. All right, so with those reflections, and some of y'all may be writing a little bit more as you're thinking more on this, now what I want you to think about, and what I've given you, so you had those 10 questions. I then gave you another worksheet. This is more of so here are the 10 questions just listed there. And what I want you to do is go to that document called WITP, Faculty in Webinar Worksheet, and I sent you all that in the email. And let me go ahead while you're doing that, read what Terry wrote. He said, my business experience in high-tech environments, often under intense deadlines, has provided me with unique insights in using team resources to be successful. That's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. That experience being, on the ground, boots on the ground, essentially really does help you to show students what they need to know. So go ahead and pull up again that in-webinar worksheet. You just answered those 10 questions. What I want you to do is go to the second page, and we're going to be going through these steps through the next half hour, essentially, as you begin to develop your thesis statement. So what I want you to do is those 10 responses, or however many you answered, which one or ones are the most important to you in your teaching. And so go ahead and circle that. Circle it now. So you've circled that. So question number 3, what I want you to do is think about what this indicates about you, about your teaching. Reflect on your brainstorming that you have been doing, and try and synthesize that and summarize that into kind of a couple of sentences. So you want to kind of give a synopsis of what it was that you value most. So this is question number 3 in the worksheet. What does this indicate? Okay, excellent. About your teaching, reflect on and brainstorm on the brainstorming comments, and synthesize or summarize that aspect. So as I said, you may have 1 or 2, so try and combine those into a synthesis of this, what you value most. So interesting, number 10 circled, number 3 circled. Number 3 is the relevance and the difference. All right, so go ahead and summarize and synthesize what you value most. And when you have that, you can go ahead and type done in the chat so I know where everybody is. And if you can't decide, that's why you can choose more than one. And that's where it all begins. Oh, cool. So Swapan says, teaching makes a difference in lives of students for better opportunities for them and creating an impact in the world. Yes. I think when I did this exercise many years ago, mine was student engagement and interest, especially since I teach a lot of non-majors. So that was my kind of introductory synthesis synopsis. So if you have that, if you've got your synopsis, if you can go ahead and post it in, and if you don't want to, that's fine. I would like to see what some of them. Thank you, Terry. Business pressures will stress new managers to cut, to cut ethical corners to meet goals. It may also cause untested young managers to abuse and neglect subordinates in some ways. I want to show them how to avoid these pitfalls. That's awesome. Huh. Terry, that reminds me, there's a, I don't spend a lot of time on Reddit, but there is an anti-work subreddit about really harrowing, horrifying stories of bad managers and bad business practices. And some of them I'm just like, wow, I can't believe that happens. And our next step is going to be kind of taking that. So if you're still working on it, we're going to kind of take it and expand on it. So that's okay if you're still working on it or you haven't really been able to verbalize it as well as you want to. So hopefully this next step will help you with that. So what you're then going to do next is you need to think about how you've changed. So you have some experience teaching or you have a lot of experience teaching, different types, different styles, different content. What you want to think about is that value that you circled as your top thing of that what you think is important. How has that changed or evolved over your career to today? So kind of in question number 4, reflect on that and just really kind of talk about how has this thinking of mine changed? How has this important aspect of mine changed? And describe it with respect to, as I said, your brainstorming idea or ideas as well. So go ahead and do that now. And you're not going to take this word for word and put it in your philosophy. What you're going to do is weave them together. So get your ideas out of how you think you have evolved or change. So go ahead and do that now. And this is an important thing to think about, especially for y'all as faculty going up for tenure promotion. This is important to talk about. And I'm interested to see what y'all write. Okay. So yeah, it is tough. Your brain's like, So this is tough, but here's my initial. Inspiring learners in a variety of engaging methods who are equipped with the knowledge, skills, and abilities to independently and collaboratively work towards solutions. Totally okay that it's wordy and flowery. I'm going to talk about that. But yeah, okay, so that's a really good first start. Absolutely. And so then how have you changed based on that? How has that evolved from previous to today? And that was why I sent y'all that those example philosophies from the professor, the psychology professor. Let's see. Johanna says, I discovered that my goal as a professor is to master keeping interesting. Master keeping top students interested in the course, challenge their minds, and at the same time motivate students that are having more problems in understanding the material, the ones that actually need more support. This balance is not easy, absolutely. And as a teacher, I continually remind myself that I am not teaching for the best students only, but most importantly for the students that need me most. Oh my God, I love that. It's so true. Excellent. Wow. Yeah, I get complacent with teaching honors students, and I know I'm lucky, and it's a privilege to be able to teach honors students. Okay, so as you're writing that, if you can post that in the chat. All right. In teaching business leadership and ethics, I now value the focus on the worker subordinate rather than on me. Oh, how cool. How do I advance in the organization? I believe the answer is that you advance by advancing the good of your department and employees. Your research supports this, and so do I. In 25 words or less. I hear you. That's awesome. Love that. And I like how you folded in your research into that statement. That's awesome. So as y'all are writing, if you're continuing to think, what I want y'all to then kind of conceptualize is these two things that you just wrote. Let's see, I have tons of data that support the benefit of, oh, cool, of a transformational empowering boss. That is awesome. Um, that's nice to hear. So these two things that you've wrote, the synopsis and this evolution statement, are now what you're going to weave together as your introductory paragraph, as your introductory thesis statement. So like a typical essay, you have a thesis statement, you have supporting paragraphs and a conclusion. The teaching statement, teaching philosophy is kind of similar to that. It does vary a little bit, but that gives you an idea of the structure. So what I want you to think about is, how am I going to weave together my synopsis and my evolution, my change together to introduce who I am as an instructor, introduce my philosophy. So let me give you an idea of how to start. It may be that what you have written is perfect, and that's the whole goal of this, is to get you to get these ideas out, get that writing down. But sometimes it helps to have starter statements. So here is one. This is the one I used to give a really bad one, some bad writing, which I will show you. So by looking at my what, we see what about my teaching, especially how it's evolved over time, which is important because what? So here is what I wrote, very bad example. By looking at how I incorporate a variety of teaching techniques, we see that student engagement through multiple modes of learning and interaction with me and other students is key to my teaching, which is important because today's students do not learn the way I did. They learn better by doing, engaging, and interacting. That is a very long run-on sentence, but my ideas are on paper. So what I want y'all to, well, actually, before I have y'all do this, let me give y'all some example starter statements. So this is from a document that I'm happy to send to you. It's from Carnegie Mellon, and the document has some examples, but what I wanted to show you was actually the starter statements. Chemistry, history, tutoring. So, expressing your teaching goals and the methods you use to achieve. Here are some starter statements to show you have reflected on your teaching practices. You can use the following phrases. So what I want you to do, and I will leave these up, is the next step is now to, and I'm going to come back to that. Hold on. So the next step is then to weave those all together. And the whole point of this is you are now foregrounding and highlighting what you're going to be talking about. What are your important values, the things that drive your teaching, how your evolution over time has changed and now reflects what you value more than it did before. This is all going to be in the opening paragraph. And then, of course, after your thesis statement, you have the support statements with examples, of course, evidence to support your reasons. So I want you to do this now, and I'll put up those starter statements in just a second. But develop now your starting introductory paragraph. The first couple of sentences, again, you may use the ones that you've already written, using these key values, this reflection of change, synopsis, your brainstorming, whatever it is. So let me go ahead. This is question number 5 in your worksheet. So question number 5. Let me now also put up those starter statements for you. So I'll give you about 5 minutes to do this right now, 4 or 5. Okay. So introductory statements and paragraphs can be inherently messy the first time, of course, with the first draft. So you don't have to post it in the chat if you don't want to. But what I want to do is move on to the next section. You may still be writing, which is fine, of course. But those of you who are perhaps already done, you also, and this is what Rasha asked about earlier, is there are other important things you want to include, of course. So your other answers that you brainstormed about as to what you value, rank them sequentially as to which ones are next important and next important. And so what this is going to do is to help you kind of outline where you're going to put them or how you're going to arrange them in the document. They may move around, but at least this gives you the first thing I will then talk about is, the values and then the ways that I do it in my assessment. So whatever it is, so list out as kind of a sketch outline each sequentially important value or your brainstorming from your questions 1 through 10. So this is in that new worksheet. This is actually number 6, not number 5. Okay. So rank 3 or 4 at least, if not 5 or so. I think 6 is going to be a lot of ideas to incorporate unless they're really well connected, which is based on what y'all have written is quite possible. So wrote this as introductory, which is similar to what I posted before, but I'm trying to add interaction and encouraging women in engineering to, let's see, whoops, oh, I see, okay. In addition to programming and underlying concepts, when I try to add them, it becomes too long introductory. Is that okay? No, I mean, yes, that's okay. That's totally fine. So as you write, as a researcher and instructor, I believe that teaching computer science should not be concerned with training, but teaching the underlying concepts, which you had posted before. The development of programming languages and hardware architectures are driven by the most exciting and lucrative applications of the day, such as computer vision, web search, apps, video games, etc. None of which existed 20 years ago. This mission has been serving as the guideline on the pursuit of my academic career. That's awesome. No, that's not too long at all. What I think I would do is, you mentioned all of those web search application, mobile apps, video games. I would say restrict only because of people will say, oh, she's going to talk about mobile apps. If you're not going to talk about some of those things, or if some of those things, mobile apps, data mining, are not part of your research or things that you talk about in class, maybe don't mention them because you're going to want to highlight the most important ones. But that's just my opinion. So no, I think that's a great introductory paragraph. So list and rank what else you want to include, because I'm going to show you formatting in just a second. You really don't have more than 2 pages that you can write. So you're wanting to be sure that you include what you want to talk about and what you can show off to whoever's going to be reading that, to emphasize to them why you are good at what you do. So Terry says, my approach to teaching has been influenced by summarizing changes in the views of corporate social responsibility, increase in team-based activities, and fusion technology into all aspects, increase of stress in the dynamic workplace. And these stressors are mitigated by solid understanding, delegation to subordinates, setting the example to superiors, and strong business ethics. Excellent. So now, Terry, with what you've written here, do definitely emphasize, because you're getting to you're talking a little bit more about your research there, and that's wonderful writing, but remember to be sure that you tailor it to the teaching realm as well. You want to fold in your research, but then how do you discuss, you say, I believe these stressors can be mitigated by these things. Talk about, I believe that I can show my undergraduate students how to think about these stressors and how they can be mitigated. So you want to make sure you fold in the teaching thread into those statements. Do we need to talk about our teaching experiences as a separate paragraph? No. So what you want to do is take in, as you talk about, say you talk about assessments, you'll talk about, in my course of computer science, blah, blah, I did this assessment because I think that it's important that students, blah, blah, blah. So you will weave that in. If you're applying for a job, then that's a little bit different. You would then have a paragraph talking about what you can teach, what you have taught. But as a tenure promotion type of document, you should weave it through the actual statement. And so go back and look at that example when I gave you the psychology professor. He did a really good job of that, which is why I like that example so much. So what is learning for me? So Johannes says, what is learning for me, the goals for my students, my most effective teaching methods, and my most transformative experience in teaching. Yeah, so I think that's a good outline. So I think what you should do, what's interesting is you said that you have your most transformative experience in teaching. How has that then impacted numbers 1, 2, and 3? So I'm curious to see, perhaps even though you have it as number 4, it may have been uh, the ground set, the basis for why you do what you do. And that would be an interesting story to tell if that's the way it would actually work out. Okay. Keystone, that was the word I was looking for. Other comments or questions as y'all are putting this together? Y'all have really good structures and good questions about them. That's what I really like about doing this online, is that you can cut and paste and show it, and it's easier for me to respond. I'll give y'all about another minute to kind of think about that. So as y'all are thinking through this, and as y'all know, because you've been doing writing your career, what you've got out there now is unlikely to actually be how it looks in the final document. But sometimes it is. Sometimes we're just really good at getting our ideas written out on paper, especially as we step through it like we are here. So don't worry about that. But what I want you to keep in mind is that you want to make sure if you have good sentences, don't delete them, but put them into another file like sentences to keep just in case, some other Word document. But you're going to rearrange these as you work through this essay anyway. So as you start to put in and fold in assessments and research and background experience, things may move around because it has a better flow to it. And so that's totally fine. That's what you know how to write. These things happen. So don't worry if things look vastly different with the final document, but your ideas are out. That's the point. So other questions or uncertainties before we get to the last little bit here? Other questions that have popped up so far as y'all have been doing this? Y'all been asking good questions as we go. And if so, go ahead and type those into the chat. One thing I wanted to mention, of course, after you leave today, go finish writing, go finish brain dumping so that you don't lose your train of thought from this webinar, because you're really into it right now and you want to make sure that you capture your ideas that you have right now. So go, I love these quotes. First drafts don't have to be perfect, they have to be written. So true. So formatting expectations down the road, it does vary by department and level of promotion. Oh, you're welcome. So usually up to 2 pages, single spaced. It may be 1 page. For, I think, post tenure, it could be 3 perhaps. So you need to find that out from your department. Keep it first person narrative style. That is very important to do. Don't, use normal fonts and margins. Don't make it crowded. I've seen headings. I've seen bullets. Headings, it really depends on how you structure it. I can go both ways with that. Bullets, I don't like. I think it looks messy. So those are some ideas of formatting. When you finish your first draft, of course, make sure that it flows well. I think that's the one problem I see with a lot of first drafts, is that it's very blocky, that you don't have connection between your ideas. And so with y'all doing that brainstorming, that really helps you to see those connections. Making it more succinct, like I said, that you may have a story that's too long. So really reflect back on that. What was the most important part of that story, that anecdote that you want to share? Oh, thank you. Oh, I know. And then, as I said, future steps, keep working on it. You won't get it all done in one day. Keep all of your drafts. As y'all know, drafts 1.1, 1.2, 3.4. And then I have these other resources for you. I sent them in the document that you guys received. Let me show you all those documents. So you received a helpful resources. The ones I want you to look at on your time is if you have examples, statement examples and disciplines. Here's one on reflecting on the process of writing itself. But then there's also if you have to put in portfolios, there's some links in here about actually developing portfolios. Okay, y'all are welcome. I am so glad that y'all were here to do this. Again, more resources, I'll send y'all those resources, just links for y'all to look at. Any other thoughts and questions about this?